The water turns cold for half a second, just a flicker, and your arms erupt in tiny bumps, like 1,000 miniature mountains pushing up through your skin. You barely notice it. It happens in under a second. But the real answer to why this happens is far stranger than "you got cold." Somewhere under your skin, right now, there is a muscle you have never consciously moved in your entire life. It is smaller than a grain of rice. It is attached to a single hair, and it just fired on command, without asking you first. That muscle has a name, arrector pili. It means hair raiser in Latin, and that is exactly its only job. When it contracts, it yanks the base of the hair upright and drags a tiny dimple of skin along with it. Stack a few hundred of those dimples together, and you get what you call a goosebump. Here is the part that should stop you. You do not control this muscle. You cannot flex it on purpose the way you flex your bicep. It belongs to something called the sympathetic nervous system, the same ancient wiring that speeds up your heartbeat when you are startled and dries out your mouth when you are afraid. It runs on autopilot, and it has been running on autopilot for longer than your species has existed. So why does a leftover reflex still fire in a body that no longer needs it? Go back a few million years. Your ancestors were covered head to toe in thick fur, and that fur was doing real work. When the temperature dropped, the arrector pili muscles contracted and pulled every hair upright all at once. Upright hair traps a thicker layer of air against the skin. Trapped air holds heat. It is the exact same principle behind a down jacket, except your ancestors were wearing one made of their own bodies. Cold air hits the skin, the muscle fires, the fur puffs out, and warmth gets locked in before it escapes. You can watch this exact same trick in birds today. A cold sparrow puffs its feathers out until it looks almost twice its normal size, for the same reason. More air trapped against the skin means more insulation, and more insulation means less heat lost to a freezing morning. Your ancestors were doing the mammal version of the same move, just with hair instead of feathers, and it worked well enough that the system stuck around for millions of years. That alone would be a tidy explanation, but it is only half the story. The same muscle also fires during fear. Watch a frightened cat sometime. Its fur stands completely on end, and its whole body suddenly looks nearly twice its normal size. That is not decoration. It is a survival trick, an involuntary bluff. Bigger looks stronger. Stronger looks less worth attacking. A threatened animal that puffs up buys itself a split second of hesitation from a predator, and in the wild, a split second is sometimes the entire difference between surviving the day and not. Charles Darwin noticed this pattern all the way back in 1872. He watched humans get goosebumps from fear and cold, and pointed to it as living proof that we share deep ancestry with animals whose fur still serves this exact defensive purpose. He was looking at your arm and seeing a frightened cat's back, and he was right to see the connection. Two completely different problems, cold and danger, and your body solved both of them with the exact same tiny muscle. Think about what that means for a second. Your ancestors did not evolve one reflex for warmth and a separate reflex for fear. Evolution found a single mechanical trick, hair standing upright, and then wired two very different emergencies to trigger it. It is a strange kind of efficiency, a survival system built by reusing the same lever for whatever problem showed up first. Here is where it gets stranger. Your body still runs both of these programs, even though neither one does anything useful for you anymore. You have almost no fur left to trap warm air. You have no predator that will be scared off by a slightly puffier forearm. The insulation program and the intimidation program are both, by any practical measure, obsolete. And yet, the muscle is still there. The nerve wiring is still there. The reflex still fires, right on schedule, every single time. Scientists call this a vestigial trait, a leftover system the body never bothered to fully delete. Evolution rarely demolishes something just because it stopped being useful. If a trait costs almost nothing to keep running, natural selection tends to simply leave it in place, dormant, waiting. That is exactly what happened here. The wiring for piloerection sat quietly in your skin for millions of years, doing almost nothing, just idling. But new research suggests this wiring may not be as retired as scientists once assumed. A 2020 study published in the journal Cell, led by researcher Julia Schwartz, found that in mice, the arrector pili muscle does far more than raise hair. The nerves that control it also connect directly to hair follicle stem cells. When the skin gets cold, those same nerves that trigger goosebumps also send a signal that wakes up dormant stem cells and tells them to start growing a thicker coat of hair for the season ahead. The goosebump, in other words, might be the visible tip of a much larger, quieter renovation happening underneath your skin. Researcher Yuki Fujiwara had already shown back in 2011 that this entire arrangement of nerve, muscle, and follicle is wired directly into the body's fight or flight response, meaning the system that gives you chills and the system that keeps your body's alarm circuitry primed are, quite literally, the same circuit. So this reflex is not fully dead. It just does not have much left to do in a mostly hairless, climate-controlled, predator-free modern life. Except for one place. One place where it fires more than almost anywhere else. And it has nothing to do with cold, and nothing to do with fear. Think about the last time a song gave you actual chills down your spine. Maybe it was a key change. Maybe it was a swelling chorus, or a single held note that seemed to arrive exactly one beat later than you expected. Your arms prickled, your scalp tingled. For a second, you felt something almost too big for your body to hold. Scientists have a name for this too. Frisson, borrowed from the French word for shiver, and it is not rare. Somewhere between half and 2/3 of all people experience it. In 2001, researchers Anne Blood and Robert Zator scanned the brains of people while they listened to music that reliably gave them chills. They found that the exact moment those chills hit, blood flow surged through the brain's ancient reward circuitry, the same regions activated by food and by other deeply pleasurable experiences. A decade later, researcher Valerie Salimpour, working alongside Zator at McGill University, discovered something even more precise. Dopamine, the brain's core reward chemical, gets released in two separate waves. The first wave comes just before the emotional peak of the song, while your brain is anticipating what is about to happen. The second wave crashes in during the peak itself. Zator later described it simply. Goosebumps from music often come from a mix of anticipation and surprise, not unlike the feeling of a plot twist landing perfectly in a good story. Why would sound do this? Because your brain treats a perfectly unexpected musical moment the way it once treated a genuine threat or a sudden burst of intense feeling. It sends the same old signal down the same old wire. The muscle that once puffed up your ancestors' fur against the cold, and the muscle that once made a threatened animal look larger, gets recruited for something entirely new. Not survival, beauty. Not everyone gets chills this easily, and that difference is not random either. Researcher Matthew Sachs found that people who experience frisson tend to have measurably stronger neural connections between the part of the brain that processes sound and the part that processes deep emotion. Other researchers, including Culver, have linked this tendency to a personality trait called openness to experience, meaning some brains are simply built with a shorter, faster path between hearing something and feeling it. If you have ever sat next to someone during a movie and felt nothing while they visibly shivered at the exact same scene, this is likely why. Neither reaction is wrong. You are simply looking at two nervous systems with slightly different wiring, both running the same ancient hardware, just tuned to different sensitivities. One person's alarm system needs a louder signal to fire. The other's goes off at the faintest hint of something meaningful. Music is not the only thing that pulls this trigger. Watch people during the final scene of a movie, right when the underdog finally wins. Watch someone standing at the edge of a canyon for the first time, staring at something too large to fully take in. Watch a crowd during a speech that lands on exactly the right sentence at exactly the right moment. All three can produce the same prickling arms, the same faint chill up the back of the neck. Psychologists sometimes call this feeling awe, and awe seems to work on your skin through the same borrowed circuitry as music. Something suddenly feels bigger than you expected. Your sense of scale gets briefly overwhelmed, and the old alarm system fires anyway, even though nothing here is remotely dangerous. So the next time your arms prickle during a chorus, or during a scene that hits harder than you expected, you are not imagining a poetic coincidence. You are watching a multi-million-year-old alarm system, built to keep a cold, frightened ancestor alive, get hijacked in real time by 3 minutes of sound, or a single sentence, or a view that is simply too big to feel small about. That tiny muscle, attached to a single hair on your arm, has now done 3 completely different jobs across millions of years. It once trapped warmth. It once made you look dangerous. And now, for reasons your own ancestors could never have predicted, it responds to a song. The water turns cold for half a second, and your arms remember something older than language, older than fear itself, and somehow still exactly as alive as the day it began.